So, why are federal financial reports important? So, primarily, number one, it's compliance. Federal regulations require the Office on Violence Against Women to collect financial reports. And those same regulations require our recipients to complete the reports. And compliance with those regulations is important for a variety of reasons. Uh, Auditors review and ensure compliance through award records. Financial reporting is taken into consideration when we do our financial monitoring of our award recipients. We also review and consider reporting history during the pre-award risk assessment process when you are applying for new funding. And overall, it's just important to demonstrate responsible financial management of and accountability for public funds. Another thing to think about as far as importance of the timeliness of financial reporting is your access to your funds under the award. So financial reports are due 30 days after the end of the reporting period. So if that due date has passed and the financial report remains unsubmitted, it is considered delinquents. And your automated standard application for payments, that ASAP account that you use for drawing down funds, that is automatically suspended and no drawdowns can occur until the report is submitted. But reinstatement for that account is not immediate. Sometimes it can take up to 48 hours before you are able to regain access to draw down those funds. So financial reports are also a useful tool for you and for us to inform how the project is going from a financial perspective. So for you, it can kind of encourage you to pause and make sure everything is going to plan, to kind of compare your financial information to what you know happened programmatically over the last quarter. And for us, it also helps us understand what's going on with your project. Does the financial report compare to the drawdown report? And how are they being submitted on time? And as Erin mentioned earlier, we perform our excess cash and delinquent federal financial report reviews every quarter. So with this quarterly analysis, we determine if awards have drawn down more money than they reported as expended on their most recent financial report. And if that occurs, this is identified as excess federal cash. So when that excess federal cash is identified, the recipient will receive an email from the financial team requesting a combination of an explanation or an updated report or for funds to be returned. But a lot of times this award is misidentified as having excess federal cash on hand because the financial report was completed inaccurately. The financial team also does the quarterly analysis of unsubmitted financial reports, and we will contact each of the recipients as kind of a friendly reminder and just to kind of check in to see if things are going okay, if you have other issues going on. So when reports are submitted on time and accurately, this allows us to have a more complete view of how our grantees are doing, both individually and on an aggregate level. And we can look for indicators that a recipient may need some extra support or technical assistance. So now that we've covered the importance of the financial report, we're going to talk about the steps to take up to completing the report. So before you complete this report, you need to do a few things. First, you want to perform an internal reconciliation within your organization's financial management system. And this is to ensure that all of your expenditures are recorded accurately. Once that's done, you will pull a cumulative general ledger report from the award inception up through the end of the reporting period. And that will act as the supporting documentation for this financial report that you're completing. Now, a good idea is to attach this general ledger report to the completed financial report to store in your physical or digital grant file so that it's readily available if you need that. So once that's done, you should collect the appropriate reviews or approvals, whatever your internal policies and procedures require. And finally, you should ensure that the proper individual is assigned to the financial manager role within Just Grants. And you can reassign those roles if necessary. So once you have all of those pieces, you need to locate the report. So first of all, the financial report is completed by the individual that holds the financial manager role in Just Grants, and only the financial manager will be able to complete this report. It is viewable to all other Just Grants users within your organization, but only the financial manager will be able to edit or complete or submit. So when a new financial report is generated, it can be found in the financial manager's work list on the home page of Just Grants. They'll be able to click on the report number, complete all the requested information, and then press submit, all within Just Grants. So a few helpful tips while you are filling out the report is that federal financial reports must be completed sequentially. So if there are several outstanding reports, you want to start with the oldest one first. Also, a report must be submitted every quarter during the period of performance, and that's regardless of whether you've done any activities on the award within that period or not. Even if your budget has not been approved, you still need to complete a financial report. And finally, the Just Grant system will not automatically save any work that you do in the system. Users are going to be automatically logged out after 15 minutes of inactivity just for security reasons. And any unsaved information that you have entered will not be saved. That'll all be lost. So make sure that you click the save button regularly. All right, we are going to get into each section of the financial report in detail. So this first section, sections 1 through 4, these are all pre-filled. And this is information about your organization and about the individual award. So if you have more than one award in Just Grants, it would be a good idea to verify that the information here is correct, to make sure that you're entering information in the report for the correct corresponding award number. All right, section 5 is your recipient account number, and this is not a required field. You can use this section if you have an internally assigned identifying number or name to this award. So you can use this if it's helpful for you, but otherwise you can ignore it. Section 6 is the report type. So this is you can select either quarterly or final, and it should always be quarterly except for your very last report, which you will mark as final. So if you accidentally switch it to final and hit submit, the beginning of the closeout process will be initiated. So you can always reach out to the grants financial management team and we will help you fix it if you've made that error. But that process will be initiated if it's a final. Section 7 is your basis of accounting. And this is another choice. You can choose either cash or accrual accounting options. And I kind of want to spend a little bit of time on this because we do get a lot of questions about the difference between cash and accrual. So these are accounting terms that describe the way that your organization records the expenses and revenues. So organizations don't switch back and forth between these two methods. It's a kind of a major overhaul of your accounting process, accounting system. It has some tax implications as well as other business implications. So you're usually either cash all the time or accrual all the time. So the difference here is that the cash accounting method records expenses and revenues when the money is exchanged. So for example, if we are using payroll as an example, the method would record the expense when the paycheck is delivered to the employee. Accrual-based accounting method, the expenses are recorded when they are incurred, and revenue is recorded when it is earned, even if the money hasn't exchanged hands. So if we're using that same example of payroll, your accrual method would record the expense at the end of the earning period. So let's say that the pay period ends on Friday, but pay day isn't until next week. Your expense would be recorded on Friday, the end of the pay period, even though you may not physically deliver the check until next week. So a good rule to follow is that cash follows money and accrual will follow your obligations and your work. All right, so section 8 is the project period, and that's going to be pre-filled. And then section 9 is the reporting period. So that's the quarter that you're reporting on. All right, so 10A through C, the federal cash section. So this form that we use for financial reporting is a standard form that's used across all federal agencies. So this section needs to be included in the report because it's part of that standard form. But the Office on Violence Against Women does not collect any of this information on this section, which is why it's all grayed out. It's not editable. So you can ignore this section. All right, and next up we have total federal funds authorized. So this is pre-filled. It's going to be the total amount of the award. 10E is your total federal shares of expenditures. And this is where we go back to that internal reconciliation that we performed at the beginning of the process. So you take that cumulative total of all expenditures throughout the life of the award through the last day of the reporting period, and you put it in this section. So it's good practice to verify that cumulative total each quarter. Don't just add this quarter's expenditures to last quarter's report. And that's because sometimes there are discrepancies that have been adjusted since then, or something was missing and it's been accounted for in the most recent report. So, and sometimes people do put just the quarterly amount in this section, but we have a pop-up box that kind of is a fail-safe for this. It will ask you to verify the amount that you entered if that amount is less than what was reported in the last quarter. Okay, so 10F is your federal share of unliquidated obligations. So this is the obligations that, or the expenditures that have been obligated but not yet expended. This section is not required, but you can complete it if it works for you. On a cash basis, it would mean that obligations were incurred but haven't been paid. And then on an accrual basis, these would be obligations that were incurred, but the expenditures haven't been recorded. And this section never includes your long-term obligations, like a subaward that you have for the full period of performance. It only includes expenditures that will be resolved within the next quarter. So 10G is your total federal share, and that is just the sum of your federal share of expenditures and your unliquidated obligations. That is going to be automatically reflected. And then 10H is the unobligated balance of your federal funds. So this is the auto-generated also, and this will reflect the funds that you have remaining after all of these expenditures have been considered. Okay. So we also get a lot of questions about recipient share. And recipient share is also known as match or cost share. And it is the portion of your project that is not paid by federal funds. Now, none of our discretionary programs require match. Only our STOP formula program has a match requirement. But sometimes a recipient will elect to contribute match. When that happens, when an election to contribute match happens, that match amount is going to be included in your final approved budget. And that amount becomes a requirement for the recipient to contribute. So those contributed funds will take on the properties of federal funds. So they're subject to the same audits and regulations as federal funds. So if you're unsure if you have this, you probably do not. Any required match amount will be reflected in 10I. And look at your federal, or look at your budget and just grants, or you can verify with the help desk if you are unsure if you have any match. 10J is the recipient share of expenditures. So that will be the cumulative amount of that required match that you've expended. So this is almost always going to be 0 unless you have a required match. So only report in this section if match is required for your program. 10K is the remaining recipient share to be provided, which would just be your total share less the expenditures you've already incurred. And that would be the remaining amount that you need to require to contribute to stay in compliance. Okay, so 10L. So program income. Generally, program income is money that's been directly generated by award activities. And generally, OVW awards do not earn income. There should only be a number in this section if program income is included in your final budget. If your program is earning income, but you don't have an income or program income in your final budget, you should reach out to your grant manager, reach out to GFMD right away, because prior approval is required for earning program income. And in some cases, income generation is unallowable for your program. So be sure to read your award conditions to see if it's allowable before you generate any income. So 10M is the program income expended in accordance with the deduction alternative. And the deduction alternative will reduce the federal contribution to the project, but the total project costs will remain the same. And if you do not have prior approval, it will always be the deduction method you will have to use. So program income expended with the addition alternative will expand the total project cost. And you can do the addition alternative if you do have prior approval to earn income. 10O will be your unexpended program income, and that's just generated automatically, but it should be 0 unless there is program income that has not been expended, program income earned that you haven't spent. All right. So now let's get into indirect expenses. So this section is reported on a quarterly basis, and the rest of the financial report is going to be on a cumulative basis. And I know that this is very confusing for everybody. But I want to clear up that this section isn't a substitute for the reporting we did prior. It is a report for a separate purpose. So indirect costs are only reported quarterly because your indirect rates can change. And we need this section to demonstrate and to be able to easily verify that the rate for the reporting period is being applied correctly. So to fill out this section, you will want to first select the type of rate that you use. If you have a negotiated rate, the type of rate will be indicated on your signed document. If you do not have a negotiated agreement, you would select de minimis. Or if you don't recover any indirect costs, then you could either select not applicable or just totally ignore this section. So 11B, you would enter the indirect cost rate that was in effect during the reporting period. 11C is the date of the reporting period. So this would be the quarter that we're reporting on. 11D is the base. So you would enter the base against which the rate is applied, which if you're using the de minimis rate of up to 15%, the base will always be your modified total direct costs, which includes salaries, wages, applicable fringe benefits, materials and supplies, your services, travel, and up to the first $50,000 of each subaward. So the most common items that you need to remove from total costs to get to that modified total direct costs, those are equipment, which are items over your capitalization threshold, participant support costs, and those subaward expenditures beyond the first $50,000. So there are a few other items to remove. So if you have something that you're unsure of that we didn't talk about here, you can reach out to us and we will help you make that determination if it needs to be removed. So if you have a negotiated indirect cost rate, the base will be determined by your agreement. So make sure you check that before you calculate all of this. All right, 11E is the amount charged. So that's just the amount of indirect that was charged during the reporting period, which would be the rate times the base. And then 10F or 11F, I'm sorry, 11F is your federal share of those expenditures, and that's entered as a dollar amount. So all of the indirect costs that are federally responsibility of the federal share of that. So then 11G at the bottom, your totals, these will automatically generate based on the numbers that are input. Now you can add multiple lines for your indirect expenses. So if, for example, you have not reported indirect costs for prior quarters for whatever reason, you can report those costs on another line, but only report in this section if those indirect costs have not yet been reported on any other financial report. Okay, so section 12 is for additional information, and nothing is required in this section unless the amount that was reported in 10E with that pop-up box I was talking about. If when the amount reported for this period is less than what was reported in the prior period, there will be a pop-up box and you will have to include a justification in this box. Now, there are other situations where entering information in this section could be useful. So for instance, you should note here if there are any corrections that are made in this financial report for any errors or discrepancies that were in prior reports. You can also make notes or remarks for yourself or others in your organization. And if there's any relevant information within this report that you want to disclose to the Office on Violence Against Women, you can disclose that here, but only include clarifying information for what is relevant to this particular report, because we only periodically review these reports, and sometimes that's done on an aggregate basis rather than individual. So we don't want you to include any urgent questions or important information. So if you have any of that, you should reach out to the help desk directly. Or your program manager. So uploading, there is a section to upload supporting documents, and that is not a requirement. But you should always maintain all your supporting documentation related to the financial report in your internal grant files. Okay, and now you're ready to certify and submit. So enter all the information for the individual that completed the report, certify that all the information is correct, and you can click Submit. Okay, but after completing the report, you will want to take a few more steps. So you need to confirm that any reviews or approvals have been completed, and that's according to your internal policies and procedures. You will want to make sure that you retain the general ledger reconciliation that report is based on. And you also want to continue to retain all source documentations for every transaction. And if you recover indirect costs, you should keep the documentation of the calculation for indirect costs for what you reported. Okay, so now a quick note about final financial reports. So this is the last financial report that you will complete for the award. It is due 120 days or within 120 days after the end of the period of performance. So you should submit this after all transactions are complete. So your subrecipients have sent in their final reports, you've made final payments, your programmatic deliverables, all the requirements have been met, you have no remaining obligations, your final drawdown or final return has been completed, you've done a final internal reconciliation, and there's no more unliquidated obligations. Other than those things, it is identical to completing a quarterly report, except that you change that to final rather than quarterly. All right, so now we're going to get into some of the common errors that we see when we look at these federal financial reports. And number one common error is that the report is delinquent. And this is for a number of reasons. Primarily, it's because either the recipient assumes that a financial report is not required if they don't have anything to report. But remember that it is due even if the budget has not been cleared, even if there's no activity on the project, even if there's no funds that were expended, you still need to complete the financial report. Another reason for delinquent reports is that the person that was assigned to the financial manager role in Just Grants has either left the organization or moved positions or is on some kind of extended leave, and no one else is assigned to complete the reports in the meantime. So if that happens and you're struggling with updating that role, we can provide some technical assistance. And also just a quick reminder that anytime there is staff turnover, you should be checking the access to all of these programs just to make sure that only the appropriate individuals have access, just for security reasons. Number two common error that we see is that the basis of accounting is either blank or inconsistent. And like we talked about earlier, that inconsistency, that you don't switch between cash and accrual accounting. But I hope that the explanation we gave earlier will kind of clear up some of that, the questions on basis of accounting. Number three is that the reports are completed using quarterly expenditures rather than cumulatively. And like I mentioned earlier, that's going to often get the award misidentified as having excess federal cash on hand. So number four is omitting the cumulative indirect costs from the cumulative totals in 10E. So the cumulative totals need to include all cumulative indirect costs, including the indirect costs that were expended in the quarter that you're reporting on. Number five is reporting drawdowns rather than expenditures. So we can see your drawdowns. What we can't see, what we don't have access to, is your internal accounting system. So for us to be able to make sure that everything is going correctly, we need to be able to see all those pieces. Number six is reporting recipient share of expenditures or program income when you don't have either of those things approved in your budget. And finally, errors with indirect costs. So oftentimes the wrong indirect base or rate, or reporting on it cumulatively versus quarterly, or not reporting any indirect costs or any indirect expenses when the approved budget includes indirect expenses and you have charged for those indirect costs. Now, the financial team performs these analyses to try to detect errors and to kind of encourage compliance. So you may occasionally receive alerts from us if there appears to be an error in your report. And so if you receive an email from our team for any of these things, we want to work with you. We want to make sure that you remain in compliance. And that you don't have issues. This is for your support and for technical assistance for you. So just work with us and be responsive. So oftentimes we get questions about how to reopen a FFR. So like submitting the original FFR, only the financial manager in Just Grants will be able to perform this action. So make sure that the correct person is logged into Just Grants as the financial manager. Now, once you get into Just Grants, there is a list on the left side of your screen, and one of the selection options is awards. So you'll click on that, and then a list of all of your awards in Just Grants will pop up. So you want to select the appropriate award number from that list. And then once you're in the award, you'll scroll down until you see this federal financial reports, and you'll click on that. And from there, a list of all the FFRs, the federal financial reports, will generate. And you will scroll down to select the financial report that you want to reopen. So in the top right corner, once you've opened the report, in the top right corner of the screen, there is an Actions drop-down menu. And from there, you select Reopen. You're also able to print the report from this drop-down menu if that's helpful for you. Now, only the most recently submitted report can be reopened. Once the report for the next quarter has generated, the most recent report will not be able to be reported or reopened. So if there are any errors in prior reports and that new report has generated, just make sure that you note that error in box 12 of the current report, of the current open report. Okay, so some common questions that we get. Accidentally marking your quarterly final as, or recording, excuse me, quarterly financial report as final. You'll want to try reopening and editing that. If that doesn't work, you can always reach out to the financial help desk and we will help you get through that. So what if you made a mistake on a final financial report that was submitted several months ago? So if you make a mistake and you can't reopen the report, you can reach out to the help desk and we will send you a PDF copy of the report for you to complete. We will update the information in Just Grants for you and attach that updated copy that you filled out for documentation. And then if that update creates any kind of discrepancy with your drawdowns, we'll help you get that resolved as well. And then lastly, we get a lot of questions about documentation. What kind of documentation do I need to upload when I submit my report? And documentation is not required when submitting. You do not need to attach any documentation. You do need to maintain internal documentation. So in case we do ask about it, you're able to provide that. All right, so here are some important dates. And I want to talk about how these federal financial reports are due 30 days after the end of the quarter. And I want to stress that it is 30 days after the end of the quarter is not always the last day of the month. So it's not by the last day of the following month, it's by the 30th day. So this graphic kind of shows the days when reporting periods end, when the reports are due, and if the report is not submitted, when your funds would be frozen. Okay, and then we also want to leave you with a few resources that may be helpful. I think Michael is going to drop this in the chat box for you. First, our Grants Financial Management Help Desk. There's always someone, a real person answering questions on the help desk. Here's our email and the phone number. So the whole team of analysts takes turns, and when it's our turn, that's our focus for the entire day. We only focus on the help desk. So we love using our experience and knowledge and expertise to assist you, to make sure that you have all of the tools that you need. We try to respond as quickly as possible, and that's generally within 24 hours. Another resource is the Just Grants Financial Manager Job Aid, which has a lot of great information for financial managers. There's also a Just Grants training website, and that has all sorts of training materials for doing almost anything you can think of in Just Grants. Finally, I have the Code of Federal Regulations and the DOJ Financial Guide, which are both the documents that provide the requirements for all of your federal awards. Okay, so now I have some questions. Time for questions. Michael, do you want to do the poll really quick before we start with questions, or what do you want to do?
Sure. We can do a quick poll just to make
Okay.
sure we just get enough information from everybody.
Yes.
So it's going to pop up a poll for everyone, and we're going to give you all a couple minutes to just answer it, and just to get some feedback from everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So I see it now. So it should be up now. And the first question is, oh, go ahead, Renee, if you want to read them, if you see them.
Oh, yeah. So we just want to hear your honest thoughts about this training and any suggestions on other topics you'd like to learn more about. We want to make sure that we're providing all the tools we can so you can implement your projects. So the first question is just, did you learn something new that will make a meaningful difference in your financial reporting? The next question is, do you still have questions regarding FFRs? If yes, please reach out to us at the GFMD Help Desk. And then finally, we want to know if you have any other ideas for topics that we can host another office hour for. And if you do, please let us know. We would love to hear those and develop a kind of training for that. All right, so with that, what kind of questions do we have? We can leave this up for a while and start answering questions.
Sure. Yeah, so we'll leave the poll up to just make sure everybody is able to answer it. I'll leave it up for maybe like another 5 minutes or so. So that way we get a response. And so let me go. We did have a lot of great questions, so I do appreciate everyone for providing questions. So what I'll do is I'll go back to some of those, and then I do see that a couple more are coming in. So please, I'll read those as well. So first question that we had, let me scroll down. So a whole lot of questions. So first question we had was, if the amount to report for indirect expenses is quarterly and the rate is negotiated, what would be the type when your negotiated rate has changed, provisional to final, and we are adjusting the accounting of the prior quarters in the current quarter? Or how would we capture the change in this section?
Okay, so with the indirect costs, if you would use whatever your rate is right now. So if you're reporting and you only have a provisional rate, you would just select the provisional rate. And then when it changes to final, you can do those adjustments later. And you can always notate that information, that change within that section 12 of the financial report. But what we want to see is what you had during the time of the report, like how you calculated that indirect costs during that reporting period. And those adjustments, obviously, they could adjust from provisional to final or whatever. But during the reporting period, we want to see, so it probably would be a provisional rate. And then in the future, you can just notate in section 12, any of the adjustments that had been made and then also your cumulative total would be updated in that section 10E. So that will record the cumulative amount. Yes, but we just want to see the quarterly amount in the indirect 11, section 11.
Okay, so let me go through a couple other questions, and I will say this, do apologize, we may not be able to not answer, but go through every question that was asked, so we do have a limited time, but we'll try to get through as many. Another question from the GFMD's perspective, what distinguishes recipients that consistently maintain strong FFR compliance from those that experience recurring reporting issues? And are there best practices you recommend to standardizing across organizations?
I think that it just indicates, which recipients may need some extra technical assistance or support. And then as far as best practices, just maintaining documentation and, documenting everything and making sure that you are entering everything on time. Let me think on this more. Michael, do you have any feedback for that one?
Yeah. With that response, it was that throughout the grant cycle or the active award, we at GFMD, we do different activities to, just check on our recipients and ensure that they are in compliance. So that's usually how we see it. But the other big indicator is especially when it's delinquent reports, of course, your funds will be placed on hold. But that usually is just, if that occurs, it's usually just a sign for either ourselves or even the program managers to reach out to our recipients and follow up with them to get them back on track. But as Renee showed, like those common issues and those common questions that come in, those are usually ways that we see that some of our recipients may need some technical assistance with the FFRs. And really, that's our main goal. Like, for example, today, and also with our help desk, is that if a recipient's having any issues, we can then reach out, or they can reach out to us, and we can provide them as much assistance as we can.
Yes. And delinquent or issues with financial reports is not in itself, a huge red flag or something it just kind of, we want to make sure that you have all the tools available to do things correctly. Like there will be other issues if there are other issues, if it's a much bigger problem, that will be a different conversation. But having a few delinquent FFRs, a lot of that happens, and it's usually explainable.
Another question that came up a lot, several questions that came up was in regards to indirect. One of them, and it came up a couple times, was, a recipient received or was utilizing the de minimis at 10%. And then, of course, with the changes to uniform guidance, it has been updated to 15%. One of the questions is, can they increase it to 15%? And if does that occur, how would they reflect it in the FFR?
Okay, yes, you can update it to 15% on any transactions incurred after October 1st, 2024. Is that right? Yes, October 1st, 2024. And I would encourage you to provide some kind of, or create some kind of documentation within your accounting system that you are, updating this. And then you can retroactively recover any of those. If you were like, say up until last quarter, you were still doing the 10%, but now you want to update to the 15, you can still retroactively collect that 15% from October 1st, 2024. And then again, we talked about earlier with the, adjusting the rates and everything, you would still put just this quarter's calculation in that indirect cost section. And then you would just note that you've updated and you're retroactively, collecting all of that.
Time for one other question
Awesome.
I'm summarizing with some of the questions that came up multiple
Mhm.
times. A big thing that came up was making edits or adjustments to a report that was already submitted. One of the questions that came up was if they've indicated a report as a cash basis, and then they realize a correction needs to be made and they need to change it to accrual basis, or they realize there was an error on a previous report. How would the recipient be able to make these edits?
Yeah, so you can only reopen the most recently submitted report. So I would just, with those that you just indicated incorrectly, I would just acknowledge that in section 12 of the report that you're submitting now, just to notate that, yes, we understand that there was an issue. We've corrected it, and from here forward, we're going to be reporting this way. So yeah, we understand that there are things that happen, there's discrepancies that happen, and sometimes there's an issue that you didn't even know about that was happening when you were reporting. So those discrepancies happen, and you just want to notate that, just acknowledge it, and report it on the next one. So I hope that was helpful. I really thank you all for being here today. I appreciate your participation, your thoughtful questions, and I hope that you are leaving here today having learned at least one new thing. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great day.
And if we did not reach any of your questions, please reach out to our help desk. You can put them
Yes.
in the help desk and we will be able to give you a response. So I do apologize, we couldn't get to all the questions. A lot of great questions. So please feel free to send an email to our help desk, ovw@gfmd@usdoj.gov. I'll put it back in the chat. And
Perfect.
again, send us your questions and thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great day.